I've already forgotten what I'm making this video about. I guess this is what it feels like to be Joe Biden. Okay, cheesy jokes aside, A Quiet Place Day 1, I watched this movie last night, and I went in with low expectations, so at least I didn't leave the theater feeling disappointed. A Quiet Place Day 1 is a cookie-cutter movie. It's bland, and it feels like another franchise movie released by the studio as a safe return on investment. Listen, I'm not joking when I say this, and I promise I'm not exaggerating to be provocative. The trailers before this movie have left more of a lasting impression on my mind than the movie itself. Not going to lie though, it may be a fluke, since the trailers before this movie actually had some bangers. But back to A Quiet Place, this movie is just basic, and I would never recommend it to anyone, let alone spend $18 at the theater. It's not horrible, it's like a 6 out of 10, but the only person I could recommend this movie to would be fans of the Quiet Place franchise. But if you're kind of tired of the gimmick like I am, then you can skip this movie. Now I won't just trash the movie without listing my complaints, so here they are. This movie is set in New York City, which is a dope-ass setting, especially for a movie like this. The city that never sleeps, a super loud and densely populated location, but it feels like it's heavily underutilized in this film. You could really insert any other city into this movie and it wouldn't make a difference. New York just feels heavily underpopulated in this movie, and we don't get the scale of millions of people living in this concrete jungle. And we don't get to see how the population reacts after a devastating event like this. I think there's a lot of potential here to show how people have to adapt to a new quiet lifestyle, especially in an environment that is naturally so loud. But sadly, this potential is largely unfulfilled. It's also a shame, since the marketing of this movie and even the opening of this film play off the idea of a loud city so well. This poster is still one of the coolest I've ever seen, but it doesn't really seem to matter that we are in the Big Apple. I've seen some people speculating that the choice to film on sets in London is the reason behind this, but I still think it's doable. The city in this movie just doesn't feel lived in. It doesn't resemble the New York we know, and it feels like the movie dropped a massive ball here that was honestly the main attraction that it built itself around. I guess if you want to see a post-apocalyptic New York, stick to I Am Legend. The other thing is that this movie is super formulaic, and it follows the conventional horror tropes that we know and most of us are pretty sick of. There is an over-reliance on jump scares, and the tension never feels genuinely gripping. The only part of this movie that actually put me near the edge of my seat was an earlier scene where a dad, who is also in the previous movie, has to make the choice to harm someone to save his family. This was actually a tense scene, and the consequence was a defining moment that would leave a lasting impact on the characters. And I just wish we had more of these types of moments. But everything else just feels manufactured, and I feel like the choice to have a suicidal character was put there to justify a lot of decisions that would otherwise be incredibly stupid. I don't think it's bad they have a character who is dying per se, but I wish there was a more meaningful conflict that came from the characters disagreeing rather than just a woman putting herself in crazy situations because she wants to get pizza before she dies.
This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?
And yes, I understand there is an emotional backstory behind the pizza, but you get the point I'm making. I feel like an underutilized dynamic here is the relationship between Eric and Sam. They could have had Eric try to urge Sam to stay alive, or at least try to be more reassuring in some way, since he doesn't know all that much about her suicidal thoughts. And maybe Sam has an internal battle on whether she should live or give in to dying, rather than just being dead set, get it, on dying. But instead what we get is an Eric who seems pretty complacent with her dying. Another thing I will say that could be considered a negative is that the aliens don't really seem uniform in what sounds they go to. There are some super faint sounds they go to at some points in the movie, but there are other sounds that happen that seem like they would attract them, but nothing happens. This might just be me, but the aliens in this movie don't really seem that consistent with the sounds that attract them, and if there is a decibel threshold that needs to be exceeded for them to pursue a noise. I won't knock the movie too hard for this though, since I understand having them go to every minuscule sound would make for way too tough of a horror scenario. Now, I won't just pound the movie without giving it some props. The marketing department obviously did a fantastic job, and the actors delivered on being expressive without being able to speak. It was cool being able to see Eddie from Stranger Things in here, and he does a great job with what he's given. This might sound stupid, but I'm happy this movie didn't force the relationship between Eric and Sam to turn into a romance. I feel like too many movies would cop out to that trope had other writers or studios gotten a hold of this script. The friendship between them does feel genuine and believable. There are also some pretty cool shots in this movie, and I like the premise overall, and not too many moments feel like plot armor or convenience. This movie is just basic, and I can really only recommend it to A Quiet Place fans, since there are a few world-building moments, but even that aspect feels unfulfilled. But those are my thoughts on A Quiet Place. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and today marks day 1 since I've forgotten this movie exists. If this movie makes more money than Furiosa, then I blow up a hospital. In-game, of course. If the feds are listening, that is a joke. I would never do such a thing. Obviously, I'm mocking the Joker.